A long time ago, a group of scientists, studying the nature and behavior of honeybees, became aware of the sudden increase in the demand for honey. After traveling the world, the scientists successfully captured an Africanized species of honeybees that could vastly outproduce, as well as out-reproduce, their European counterparts that were currently responsible for the honey output. Once the scientists brought these Africanized honeybees to their honeybee farm, they decided to keep them separated from the general population of European honeybee colonies, due to their extremely aggressive and hostile nature. The scientists envisioned a honeybee society that was fully integrated, that collectively produced the same level and quality of honey output of the Africanized honeybees, but with the same level of docility and controllability as the European honeybees. So they began a campaign of capturing and experimenting on the various caste members of the Africanized honeybee colonies. The scientists gained an incredible amount of insight into the Africanized honeybees' hierarchical caste structure, which they discovered to lean more towards a patriarchy, as opposed to the matriarchy of their European honeybee counterparts. The scientists began experimenting with the pheromones of the caste members both of the Africanized honeybees, as well as their European counterparts, in an effort to create a utopian integrated honeybee colony that could be fully controlled, as well as meet the growing demand of high-quality honey. The scientists began experimenting with the pheromones of the caste members both of the Africanized honeybees, as well as their European counterparts, in an effort to create a utopian integrated honeybee colony that could be fully controlled, as well as meet the growing demand of high-quality honey. One fateful day, while dissecting a drone from the Africanized honeybee colony, the scientists inadvertently released a particular pheromone that triggers the colony's attack to defend the hive response. This incident caused all of the Africanized honeybee colonies to go on the offensive like never before. This event prompted the scientists to diligently conduct research on an herbal blend of specific herbs and spices that would include pheromones that would trigger mating, as well as increased honey output responses. After several trials of this newly formulated smoke sedation, the scientists all agreed that removing the majority of the first generation males from the Africanized honeybee colonies would yield desirable results. After the successful removal of the majority of the first generation males, in conjunction with progressive smoke sedations, the Africanized honeybees finally reached a desirable level of docility and controllability, while maintaining their high levels of quality honey output. The scientists began to slowly integrate the next generation of docile Africanized honeybees into all of their European counterparts' colonies. After the evolution of several generations, the scientists finally achieved their utopian integrated honeybee colony.
What's going on, everybody? Safar Sadek here. Ta-da! There it is. This is what the scientists, aka beekeepers, had envisioned. This model right here. This is what they did, all that work and suffering and sacrificing and all this other stuff. This is what they were gunning for, and they finally achieved it. All right, let's take a look at this hierarchical structure. Sorry about that. I'm trying to activate my cursor. Come on now. There we go. So we're going to talk about the upper tier first, and then we'll drop down. Okay, there's 3 caste members in any hive. You have the queen, which is numero uno. And you got these two dumbasses right here, your drones. Look here, Pookie and Ray Ray. And then you have your workers. We'll talk about them in a bit. Let's go up here and focus on these two cast members here. Of course, you have the queen, you know, and you see how young she is. She's got her crown on, one of them damn bonnets. And you got these two dumbasses right here, Pookie and Ray Ray. Now, remember in the presentation before I came on here that only Pookie and Ray Ray's sperm is collected by the queen. If for any reason, and I do mean it's extremely rare, that any of the males from down here reach the queen, which is, I do mean extremely rare, that seed is taken out. Cannot be allowed to assimilate into the drone caste. We can't have that. Okay? So these are the only two that's, you know, excessive, that have access to the queen. So that's the reason why, that's how she reproduces, are these two dumbasses right here. And maybe one of her every now and again. And then they'll beekeeper will collect her and start another colony. But for the most part, this is what she's putting out right here. And these two alone. If any seed from down here reaches up there, terminate it. Can't have that. And the beekeepers don't intervene and do that. They do. Or the queen herself will take them out. So, within this hierarchical structure up here, there are three main subcastes that these two dumbasses right here generally propagate among the royals of the colony. You have the dope man, okay? Then you have his enforcers or his goons, and then you have the peasants, the ones that are, you know, low tier clowns. All right. So this is the only thing that the queen can reproduce. Either these dumbasses or one like her. That's it. That's it. All right. They live a life of pleasure, a life of carelessness, a life of entitlement, a life of being spoiled, a life, just in my opinion, totally worthless and useless. But the beekeepers had to have it this way. All right, now let's drop down to the worker caste, which is pretty much society as a whole. And as you can see behind the worker bees, you see every occupation of society that exists makes up the worker class, which is a combination of Africanized and European honeybees that have been made docile. You should have seen the presentation before you got to this point, so you should understand how this happened. Okay, in this model, there's two categories, males and females. Among the males of this caste system, or this caste class here, you have simps and LGBT. Female side, you have feminist and LGBT. That's what makes this up right here. And having the worker class like that is what makes this entire model function the way it does. Excuse me. So you may be asking yourself, well, why are the Africanized bees considered royalty in this model and not the Europeanized bees? Well, it's simple. Because these have the more aggressive nature, okay? So every time they get their smoke sedations and everything, it's really targeting them more so than down here, or at least the European collective down here. It's more so for the Africanized. Why? Because there's always that slight chance that a generation could come out that's not susceptible to this model right here and revert back to what the beekeepers had to deal with before they came up with this. They can't have that. So to control these right here, even more so than their European counterparts, they put them up here above the entire colony. That keeps them extremely docile. As long as this is the head, then these stay docile. that keeps the whole colony docile. Yeah, you may have some grumbling and complaining from down here. So what? They're above everybody in this model, in this structure. They are. Okay? So if anything down here starts to, get too much out of control, the beekeepers aren't going to, intervene other than smoke sedations. No, she's going to send them two down there to deal with it. Even though they don't have stings, but they can still cause a lot of damage. All right? They can still do it because of the aggressive nature, these two motherfuckers right here are physically stronger than the ones down here, even though they do all the work. All right? But they can be a force to be reckoned with. So they, not only are they up here getting higher than what the smoke sedations produce, and spreading that shit around so they can all live this carefree lifestyle. But if they feel like this caste down here is not producing like they need to, or not doing what they were conditioned to do, then that's when these two gonna go down there and regulate. All right, and it does happen. So the beekeepers have this set up so any hostility is going to be confined to in here and not external, like what they experienced before. They're not having that no more, so they say. So this model for them works. You got a queen or a female in charge. You got effeminate drones keeping her pregnant, which keeps her reproducing effeminate drones, as well as simps and effeminate males, feminists, and effeminate feminine females. It's all from a masculine perspective. This is straight up bullshit. But from the beekeeper's perspective, this is profitable. All right. So you can't hate with so much, but it is what it is. All right. One fateful day, because down here they're responsible for going out, gathering raw resources, pollen and all that, whatever resources are needed to upkeep the nest, that's their responsibility. So they do the going out and coming in. These two rarely ever come out of the nest. All they do is just lounge around and fuck and get high all day and eat. That's it. But they go out, they're responsible for gathering pollen, whatever else they need to keep that nest up. Okay? They have to fan their wings to make sure they don't get too hot while they're indulging in their worthless, useless daily activities. God forbid if they get too hot. They got to have their AC. All right? So one fateful day, a group of these workers went out, and they ventured out a little farther than they usually would to gather pollen from flowers, which was divine intervention. And so, let's go over there. And so when they went out, they discovered this species of flower that they had never seen before. It was unfamiliar to them. But because of curiosity, they went down and began to pollinate. Now, before I continue, let me show you, I'm not going to say this out loud. Y'all just going to have to look at this, and you have to go do your own research. Look at this down here at the very bottom. I'll give you a few seconds to look at that and write it down so you can go look it up and on YouTube and Google, whatever, and do what you got to do. Okay, and I call this red pill pollen because that's the effect that it had on the bees. So they get on these flowers and they start, doing what they do to get the pollen off of it, and immediately it's like scales fell from their eyes and they start looking around. I was like, oh shit. Now, mind you, they are used to being sedated by smoke on a consistent basis to maintain that docile state or that near blind state that they're always in, as per the beekeeper's instructions. Well, when they get on these particular flowers, it's like the effects of that are like completely diminished, and it's like they've been reset to factory defaults. And they're looking around, they're like, wow. They see everything as it really is. So for the first time, to them, it's like, man, we've been seeing through fog all this time, or straining to. And on their way back to the nest, they noticed the beekeepers. And they were never afraid of the beekeepers up until now, because they've always viewed the beekeepers as the benefactors of the, collective. But they see them, and they see them for who and what they really are. And they're like, oh shit. And they can even sense their true intentions. And that causes a great deal of anxiety in this group of bees. So they fly completely around, take a whole nother path so that they could avoid the beekeepers altogether, hoping that they didn't see them and realize, hey, these bees are acting a little stranger than usually. And what the hell are they doing all the way over there on those flowers? Okay, so they escaped detection by the beekeepers and they made it back to the nest. And the Africanized bees, of course, harvested more of this shit than all the rest of them. So when they get back to the nest, immediately the nest, the structure that the beekeepers had created was upset, to say the least. Let's look at this slide right here and see what happened when they got back to the nest and that pollen started circulating through the collective as a whole. This happened. There's a question mark right here above this idiot too. But this happened right here. It changed the entire dynamics. Let me get my cursor back and let's go check this out. All right, let's go up here. All of a sudden, these jackasses right here, they're like, hey, what the hell is going on? All of a sudden, the queen becomes somewhat self-aware. And she becomes aware of these two dumbasses right here. And she, for the first time in her life, realizes, I don't like these guys. I'm sick of them. I'm tired of them. They musty, dusty, rusty, crusty. I don't want shit else to do with them. See, this happened to all of the colonies, not just one. It happened to all of them. Because the bees usually all come out at the same time from all the colonies, from the entire bee farm, and go out and do their pollination. So this happened to all of them. So all the queens in these various, hives and everything, they become self-aware and they're like, I'm sick of these guys. Where the real bees at? I'm tired of these dudes. And these guys right here are starting to become self-aware and they're looking at the queen like, all we do is whatever she tells us to do, man. What the hell kind of life is that? You see what I'm saying? So it creates a great deal of confusion in the top tier hierarchy of this model, to the point to where it starts causing dissension. Now the queen is way out of pocket now. The queen is very disrespectful, especially to these two. She don't want nothing else to do with them, but because of the caste system, this is all she can deal with. She's not allowed to mess around down here. She's hopelessly, in track with dealing with this right here. And she's becoming extremely disenfranchised as a result of it. Why? Because of the red pill pollen that has now hijacked this model that was working damn near flawlessly before. Okay, let's go down here. Now, the overall sentiment in the worker caste is the same as above with a few exceptions. Look at these exclamation marks. These are the ones among the worker class that have been fully, born again from this conditioning that they had always been in. So now let's go and look and see what's going on between the two classes. Among the males now, you have what's known as MGTOW. That's what this represents here. And you still got your simps and your LGBT. Within the females, you now have bees that are becoming more feminine, as well as the pick-me class right here. And you still got your feminist and your LGBTQ. And you have a wild card caste system that has sprung up as a result of this transformation. Chameleons. Chameleons could pretend to be any of this. They are the greatest threat in this entire model, because they can, like I said, can pretend to be any one of these, and they do. whatever fits the narrative. All right? They're even a threat to them up here. A huge threat, because they don't know if they're still here or if they're still here. They're still trying to figure this part out. The MGTOW, the feminine, and the pygmies, they're still trying to figure that part out. They say it's threatening, but at the same time, they're trying to figure it out. This is the greatest threat among everybody, because at least here, you know who they are. At least here, you know who they are. You're learning who they are. You know they are not them, and you know they are not them. You don't really know who they are. Okay? So you have a complete different upset with just these right here. Well, the beekeepers became aware of this transformation by looking at the quality of the honey, because every time they harvested honey, they sent it through a great deal of, you know, microscopic scrutiny and testing it out and everything, and they noticed something different about this honey. They were even affected by the sedative effects of this new honey. They realized how hallucinogen it was, and they realized also that they could see on a higher spiritual plane than what they were accustomed to. So they was like, oh shit. So if we are experiencing this, God only knows what could be happening in all these goddamn colonies. So they went back to the drawing board and they started coming up with, you know, all these different formulas and everything. Man, they started heavily pumping these hives with this new formulated smoke to try to reverse the effects of what just happened. It was too late. Because now the queen is starting to reproduce, you know, those different brands or different casts of bees. She started reproducing them. Why? Because some of them were now able to gain access to her like they couldn't before. And even though she was making attempts to terminate those particular offspring, some of them slipped through, just enough to be a main threat. And as a result, the whole hive started becoming tipsy-turvy. I mean, there's a lot of turbulence and turmoil going on in these hives now. So much so that it started affecting the overall quality of the honey, to the point where the beekeepers had to definitely intervene. And this was their, this is a last-ditch effort to try to fix or to reset what they had in motion for a while, that they were profiting and benefiting from. This is what they had to resort to. Man, if we don't get this shit back to the way it was, we're done. We're out of business. Well, after doing this for a while and constantly checking the honey of its quality and this, that, and the other, it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse, until the Africanized bees started quickly revert back to their naturally hostile and aggressive nature. And now you got a lot of turmoil going on within every one of these colonies. A great deal of turmoil. The Africanized bees are killing each other at accelerated rates. The Europeanized bees are forced to abandon their somewhat docile nature and create a defense mechanism to defend themselves against the Africanized bees that are all integrated together. And your MGTOWs and your feminine and pygmies have now banded together against the rest of the hive. Your chameleons are just, trying to fit in where they can get in. All right? And the beekeepers realized this, and yet they kept doing this right here. They kept smoking and smoking, blowing all that smoke, mixing up herbs. They were just throwing shit together. They got so desperate and started losing so much production. And next thing you know, this hostility was no longer confined within the hives. They started coming out and getting at the beekeepers. They was like, you know what? There's only one thing left to do. We got to sack this operation all together. And so that's what they resorted to do. This is where society is right now, as we speak. Right now. That's what's going on with this society as a whole. The beekeepers was like, okay, we're going to wash our hands clean of this, but this is what we're going to have to do now because we have completely lost control because of what had happened. But the unfortunate thing is for the occupants of most of the colonies, now all the hives are filled with smoke, but the bees are used to smoke. They're used to being sedated by smoke. And these particular colonies are extremely used to smoke coming in various forms to the point to where they can never get used to one type of smoke. So now all the colonies are filled with smoke. The only thing is, it's the smoke of the hives being burnt and not the beekeepers blowing in smoke sedations. And so because now the bees have been, sedated down to a dumbified state, the majority of the nest doesn't make it. They don't make it. However, in closing, those bees that went and pollinated those flowers, the odor of those bees and their offspring that were allowed to escape being terminated and deleted, they all gathered together and they just fled the bee farm altogether and went back out somewhere into the wilderness and reintegrated with nature itself and went back towards their patriarchal caste system which they were before. They lived happily ever after. The beekeepers were never able to gain access to them again, ever. All things must come to an end, good or bad. That's the way it is. So I hope you all enjoyed this little presentation. It's just another way of explaining what's going on and, using history and facts and all this other stuff and craftily intertwine it together to put together a presentation like this, something that's not, mainstream on this platform. So having said all that, I hope you gained something from it. If not, watch the video until you learn, because what was presented to you here is what's been going on the whole time. Peace.